Picking a mascot is a big deal. Choose wrong and you could get stuck being associated with Mr. Pants. A mascot is a big part of a company's branding, and in the world of video games, they not only act as the face of the company, but tend to represent that company's ideals. Mario represents Nintendo's commitment to fun, family-friendly titles. Sonic embodies the edgier attitude that Sega adopted in the 90s, and I'll always associate Master Chief with Mountain Dew-fueled all-nighters and good old mid-2000s angst. And then there's PlayStation. Honestly, what isn't their mascot? And for me, that's always been a really weird thing about PlayStation. For such a massively successful IP, they've never really stuck with a single mascot for too long, which makes it really difficult to pin any particular brand image upon them. They've had so many faces representing their brand over the years that it's hard to pick any one of them as being the PlayStation mascot. So let's take some time to review the world's oddest police lineup, i.e. the history of PlayStation mascots, to see how these faces have changed over time, and to determine if there's any one of them that stands out as being the face of the PlayStation brand. Well, it can only go up from here. First introduced at E3 1995, Polygon Man is generally recognized as the first PlayStation mascot and was supposed to demonstrate the power of PlayStation prior to its release in North America and Europe, but what he actually did was scare children. On one hand, I can see what they were going for. He's bright purple, graphically impressive, and whoever designed him likely took inspiration from Sonic in the way they distilled the spirit of the 90s into this particularly edgy design. On the other hand, look at him. What the hell, Sony? Yeah, it didn't take long for this guy to get scrapped in favor of more, shall we say, marketable characters. He's made cameo appearances in a few recent titles, but for the most part, Polygon Man has been largely forgotten by Sony, and after staring at his face for a few moments, can you really blame them? 1996 was when the PlayStation really starting with its game releases. I mean, with Nintendo releasing their new Mario machine this year, it was kind of a necessity for Sony to get some titles under their belt. This year saw the origin of several Sony icons, but the two characters that really picked up the mascot mantle happened to be a pair of Commonwealth enthusiasts. Firstly, as a mascot, Crash kind of just makes sense. He's a platformer protagonist, but whereas Mario was going in more of an action-adventure direction and Sonic was, struggling, Crash Bandicoot is a pretty cut and dry interpretation of 3D platformer. Then there's Lara Croft, which, sure, the original Tomb Raider might have also released on the Sega Saturn. Both of these titles were instant commercial successes, immediately prompting several sequels, and due to the Saturn's lack of, shall we say, sales, Tomb Raider ended up becoming exclusive to PlayStation, at least where home consoles are concerned. And thus, PlayStation's got its first two mascots, and holy shit, they could not be any different. Between the two, I'd say Crash is definitely the more versatile mascot, getting featured in various spin-off games and advertising campaigns, but you can't deny Tomb Raider's status as a truly landmark title, as well as Laura's vast amounts of what passes for in 1996 as sex appeal. They did eventually go third party though. Tomb Raider jumped ship not long after the Dreamcast released, and after their initial publishing deal with Sony ended, Universal Interactive decided that Crash was simply too big to stay a PlayStation exclusive, and that's how we ended up with Crash Boom Bang. The franchises aren't quite as prominent now as they were in their heyday, but they're both still iconic characters, and remain to this day the first true PlayStation mascots. No offense, Polygon Man. While Crash may have taken direct aim at Mario as a mascot, Sony's next hero looked to conquer the genre that Mario was leading the way in. All things considered, Spyro the Dragon is actually a pretty impressive title. For only being Insomniac's second game, they were ambitious in going straight after the Mario 64 crowd with an open-ended 3D platformer. Sure, it wasn't nearly as revolutionary as Mario 64, but it's still a pretty classic title that was widely considered the peak of the genre on PlayStation, and is one that generates plenty of nostalgia for many a 90s kid. I wouldn't call Spyro quite as ubiquitous with early PlayStation as someone like Crash, but among early 3D platformers, he's definitely one of the greats. And also, like Crash, didn't stay an exclusive series for long. Insomniac made a quick 3 entries in just as many years before selling the IP off, so Spyro didn't have a terribly long time in the spotlight as a PlayStation mascot. However, it did solidify Insomniac as a top PlayStation developer, and started the trend of them creating PlayStation mascots for years to come. Behold, another mascot most people have probably never seen before. While Crash and Spyro were tearing it up in the American market, the success of virtual pet game Doko Demo Issyo led to the rise of a PlayStation representative in Japan. Toro Enoa, an anthropomorphic cat and one of the main Pakapi in the game, was one of the most prominently featured characters during Doko Demo's marketing campaign, and as a result not only became the face of the series, but the representative of the PlayStation brand as a whole in Japan. He was so popular, in fact, that the series made drastic changes to its fundamental formula so it could focus more on him as a character, going for smaller, more story-driven experiences in the titles that followed. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with this series at all, and considering I don't speak Japanese, it's not particularly easy to research either. From what I can tell, there hasn't been a mainline entry in years, so it's hard to say exactly what the state of the series is or how prominent of a mascot Toro has remained. However, unlike Sony's divisions in America and Europe, who didn't want a single character representing the PlayStation brand, Toro was recognized by Sony of Japan as an official PlayStation mascot. Actually, he's the only character ever to get officially recognized as a PlayStation mascot, so, kinda have to talk about him, don't I? With the advent of the PlayStation 2, Sony needed to quickly fill in the mascot gaps left by their formerly exclusive franchises, so what developer could possibly be up to such a monumental task? Me, said Naughty Dog, Sucker Punch, and Insomniac pretty much simultaneously. In hindsight, Jack, Sly Cooper, and Ratchet make up a really odd trio of mascots in that they are all exclusive to PlayStation, all from pretty similar genres, and were introduced in pretty rapid succession. You'd think that they'd step on each other's toes sales-wise, but I guess that's not the case considering the PS2 is, you know, the PS2. The continued sales and longevity of these franchises indicate that these characters were PlayStation's top dogs throughout the life of the PS2 and well into the life of the PS3. Okay, maybe not so much for Sly Cooper, but at the very least Jack and Ratchet appear to have maintained their status as the PS2 mascots, and for a lot of fans, they're probably still the definitive mascots for PlayStation as a whole. These character designs look like they're aimed straight at Nintendo and Sega too, bright and colorful representatives of some fun for most ages franchises with just a dash of that early aughts angst. Within a couple years though, I think it was starting to become apparent that Nintendo and Sega were going in a bit of a different direction creatively, and that Sony might have some unexpected competition by way of Bill Gates and the Rock Box. I wonder if that's part of the reason why their next flagship character was such a drastic departure from any of their previous mascots. No doubt about it, Kratos is definitely pretty out there as a mascot. What started as the awkward three-way love child of Greek mythology, dark fantasy, and the concept of wildly swinging around sharp objects ended up becoming a critically acclaimed icon that sold pretty well for what is in hindsight a really niche concept. Among the truly big PS2 exclusives, God of War gave the PlayStation brand a splash of maturity that few other titles would be able to replicate, so for the sake of variety, I can sort of understand why they'd want to promote the game so heavily. But it still feels like a really odd choice to make Kratos such a flagship character. While Master Chief might have demonstrated that the protagonist of a mature franchise can find success as a platform's mascot, there is a huge difference between sci-fi action shooter and opening a game by stabbing a Hydra in the face and impaling its head with a ship mast. God of War was damn near the bloodiest, most violent game on the market at the time of its release, so for Sony to have so actively embraced Kratos as a mascot by giving him numerous TV spots and multiple special edition PSPs, it just feels odd, especially when compared to who they had representing the brand beforehand. I think I just gotta chalk it up to him being a product of his era. Man, the early 2000s were weird, and I don't think it helps that the Xbox brand was diving face first into that weirdness. Regardless, Kratos remained a pretty significant figure throughout the life of the PS3, at least until the main trilogy of games brought his story to a temporary conclusion. Speaking of PS3 mascots, honestly, I have a hard time naming many PS3 protagonists that aren't Nathan Drake, though in my defense, Uncharted has become a pretty iconic PlayStation series. These games sold really well, with both 2 and 3 sitting in the top 5 best-selling games on the system. Plus, with Uncharted 4 and the Nathan Drake collection also being some of the best-selling games on PS4, they ensured that Drake would remain an icon for well over a decade after the series began. As a mascot though, I gotta say that Nathan Drake does feel a bit out of place. It doesn't help that when compared to other mascots, he's kinda just, you know, a dude. That doesn't make him any less popular though, what with his devil-may-care attitude and Indiana Jones-esque adventures. He's a lovable rogue adored by fans and PlayStation 2 it seems, considering they adorned him with console bundle after special edition console after more console bundles, combo packs, remasters, the works. I'd be hard-pressed to find another PlayStation franchise that feels as heavily endorsed by Sony as Uncharted, and when you throw The Last of Us into the mix, I feel like this pretty easily solidified Naughty Dog as PlayStation's top developer, at least for the time being. Still, even though the Uncharted games aren't quite on the same brutality level as God of War, Drake is nevertheless another protagonist for a somewhat more mature game series. The PlayStation is a family machine. It doesn't want to only be known for mature franchises. They gotta show the younger kids and families out there that it has something to offer them too. Which is why growing up, I associated PlayStation with a totally different mascot. As a kid, my views on gaming systems were way simpler. Nintendo had Mario, Xbox had the Forza car, and damn it, PlayStation had Sackboy. LittleBigPlanet may not have had the longest time in the spotlight, but man, it shined really bright for those first couple of years. That first entry not only looked and felt entirely novel when compared to just about any other puzzle platformer ever, but it received both massive sales and widespread critical acclaim. Crazy stuff for a brand new developer. Now, I never had a PS3 as a kid, nor did I ever play any of the LittleBigPlanet games, and I didn't get into following gaming news until about 2017 or so the fact that even I knew about LittleBigPlanet as a kid, that should be a testament to how impactful those first couple of games were. As a game with such a heavy focus on customization, level creation, and user-generated content, I think it really clicks with the do-everything mentality that PlayStation started to adopt in its branding shortly after this game's release. It was the perfect family-friendly adventure to act as the introductory face to PlayStation's wide range of IPs. And from a design perspective, Sackboy is simultaneously simple and one of a kind. Of course, he would be a great character to represent the PlayStation brand. Just look at him. He's a little sack man. Sure, there were other characters that shared the spotlight, but for me, it's these two that just scream PlayStation 3. But of course, their time in the spotlight did have to end. Drake's story reached its conclusion in 2016, and Sackboy kind of just disappeared after LittleBigPlanet 3. But by this point in time, we've reached an entirely new generation. We're on the PS4 now, baby. We need some brand new mascots to represent a brand new era of PlayStation. Oh god, he's back! Kratos' return to the spotlight was kind of inevitable considering the critical and commercial success of 2018's God of War. This is pretty widely considered one of, if not the best game on PS4, featuring a much more mature Kratos and a story that feels right at home with the PS4's other great narratives, and with everyone highly anticipating a sequel, it follows that he would stay in the collective consciousness for some time. Through TV commercials and some special edition consoles, Sony seemed to really endorse Kratos and to some extent Horizon's Aloy as the new faces of PlayStation, but I think the character that's taken more of the lead in the years since is another 2018 protagonist, and I dare say that he is the strangest PlayStation mascot yet. SpiderMan from SpiderMan is in fact Spider-Man. It feels really odd to say that one of the most iconic superheroes ever conceived is a PlayStation mascot, but hey, Spider-Man 2018 was a smash hit, narrowly outselling God of War and even GTA 5 on PS4. It seems to be an IP that Sony is intent on letting everyone know belongs to them, considering it's one of the only PlayStation franchises that they've consistently released special edition hardware for in the time since. But all three of these characters do a good job of representing what the PS4 really came to be known for: exploration-oriented adventure games with a heavy emphasis on story. That was PlayStation's bread and butter for the 8th generation of consoles, and arguably still is. Those three faces of the PS4, they're still pretty prominent characters well into the life cycle of the PS5. But of course, we still have one more character to discuss, the newest face of PlayStation, and he may just be the one mascot that really sticks. Yes, I'm going to talk about Astrobot. And first of all, no, the 2024 title is not Astro's first game. He's actually been around for well over a decade at this point. As the protagonist of a couple tech demos and a VR game, Astro on PS4 primarily represented the accessories that most people either didn't get to experience or, to be honest, didn't really care about. Astro's Playroom was a neat showcase for the PS5's DualSense controller, and it not only gave Astro good exposure, but was also a title most people seemed to have a lot of fun with, at least until Demon's Souls finished installing. But the game's always got good reviews, so when Team Asobi announced a proper, full-length Astro adventure that wasn't stranded on VR, I think it kind of just made sense, and holy shit, what a game it turned out to be. Astrobot wasn't just a good 3D platformer, it blew expectations sky high. It was charming and creative, but most importantly, it built on Playroom's themes of honoring the PlayStation legacy. With as many Easter eggs and references as it's got crammed into it, this is a proper celebration of gaming history, with Astro being the character that unites other PlayStation characters. On top of that, his design is outstanding. It's sleek, it's futuristic, but it's also fun and playful, seemingly everything that the PS5 wants to be seen as. Astro may finally be the do-it-all mascot that PlayStation may not have known they were looking for. Sure, they may just move on like they normally do, but at the very least, he feels well suited to represent the brand in its current state. Long story short, I am by no means claiming this to be a definitive list of PlayStation mascots. I'm sure some of you are very upset that I did not show more love for the less obvious candidates, like Parappa the Rapper. On a completely unrelated note, shout out to Parappa the Rapper. But it should provide a solid look at the very wide range of characters that have represented the big PS over the years. So is there any one character that sticks out to me as the PlayStation mascot? Honestly, not really. I'd like to say Astro, but he's so new to the spotlight that it's really hard to determine what his long-term status is really going to be, and the rest of these have such an odd history of emerging, fading, re-emerging, and moving to and from other platforms that it feels really odd to pick any one of them as the representative of the history of PlayStation in its entirety, and you know what? I think that's really neat. While I like the idea of having a permanent mascot, I also respect the decision to not have one, especially for a brand as ever-evolving as PlayStation. They've done basically a little bit of everything over the years. You could ask 10 different PlayStation owners what their favorite series is and get 10 different answers, and honestly, it wouldn't sound completely far-fetched. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure Xbox fans are obligated by law to have played Halo at some point. It's an unusual choice that's worked out well for PlayStation so far, so even if they do move on from Astro in the future, I can't really be too surprised. As for myself though, I think a mascot could be a fun addition to the channel, though designing one takes way too much time, which is why I'll be doing the environmentally friendly thing and repurposing an old mascot that no one cares about anymore. I have a program here that recycles old characters that are no longer in use, so new channel mascot in 3, 2, 1. Damn it.